you'll know now it's time for the newspaper review. Sally and I are going to take a look at the stories making headlines around the world. We'll begin with the Straits Times, leading on the death of Singapore's first Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, at the age of 91. Now, the paper describes him as his nation's founding father.
This is today's Le Figaro, which says after the first round of French local elections, there's still all to campaign for as former president. Nicolas Sarkozy, the far-right Front National and the Socialists all fared better than predicted.
The Financial Times reports on a warning letter from the Greek Prime Minister to Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel that his nation's impossible debt repayments could mean the country runs out of cash before the end of April.
Wall Street Journal covers China's bid to become a world leader in genetically modified seeds as a means of securing food resources for its growing population.
Staying with GM foods, the Independent newspaper says one of its investigations has revealed that some African farmers are being warned of a GM foods cancer threat that doesn't exist.
And finally, this is the front page of the Telegraph, featuring the reburial of the remains of the 15th century monarch Richard III. The paper calls it the return of the king after 530 years.
That took place in your hometown.
It did indeed.
We'll talk more about that, and we're going to talk with Cornelia Meyer, who's CEO of MRL Corporation Business Consultancy. Good to have you with us, Cornelia.
Morning, Cornelia.
Good morning.
You met Lee Kuan Yew, didn't you?
Yes, I did. When I was advisor to the Japanese Minister of Trade and Industry, he had his first visit, he had just stopped being Prime Minister, his first visit as senior elder statesman to Japan, which is when I had the privilege to meet him.
What did you make of his role? I mean, no one can deny that he helped Singapore into economic prosperity, which is an understatement, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess, you know, the GDP grew 100-fold from 1960 to now. So that's a big thing. He came from nothing to a big first enterprise trade, and now, you know, he attracted investment. It's a technology hub, so he did a lot economically. He was probably not the most democratic man, but then needs must. It was the time of the Vietnam War, you know, when he ascended to power. It was a time when China was, you know, very communist, when India was very aligned with Russia. So it was a different time. Now that, you know, things have sort of calmed down on that east-west front, is the time probably also to look at sort of democracy and those things.
All right, interesting. Lots and lots of
comments,
tributes
tweets.
we're getting
Absolutely.
from all sides about him. Let's look at France now. Interesting shifts there taking place politically. Of course, from an economic point of view, France is in quite a weak spot. But let's just look at the political scene and how it's unfolding.
Yeah, it's very interesting because basically there were three surprises. The first surprise was UMP, the party of Mr. Sarkozy, did extremely well. The second surprise was Marine Le Pen, the Front National. She did not quite as well as one had thought, but she still did very well. And the third surprise was Monsieur Hollande and his socialists were not obliterated. They still made about 21%. So it's, as you said earlier in the intro, it's still all to go for.
What's interesting is when you look at the economic situation in France, which is why many say Marine Le Pen's party has done well in recent weeks, and many thought this party would do much better in this first round of elections when you have youth unemployment at such a high level, and that is how far-right or right of conservative parties are doing well in economically challenged parties. Take example Greece as well, where we've seen the far-right become much more popular.
Absolutely, but you see also, like Greece, you see that the left is doing quite well too, because sort of unemployed people tend to vote with people they think will speak for them, which is either the far right or the left. And UMP, I'm not surprised, because if you look at France, the economy is in bad shape, and it's, I call it creeping desindustrialization, which is not good for having a good base, you know, an economy that's broadly based. So obviously people think that Sarkozy will be good for the economy. So it's surprising, but not surprising.
And interesting that whatever happens, Marine Le Pen could be the one to negotiate with post an election.
Yes. Yes, and I mean, I find that personally, I find the rise of the right throughout Europe, something of the far right throughout Europe, something that is disconcerting, to say the least.
Let's look at Greece now in a bit more detail. Financial Times, their top story, because they say they've seen a letter that Mr. Tsipras wrote to Angela Merkel prior to their meeting today in Berlin, in which he says, we're running out of money and fast. We need the financial aid you've promised to us.
Yep.
Now, really,
Yep.
Money's not being released to them because the European lenders are not happy with their reform ideas. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, he says, look, we can either pay our pensioners or we can pay the IMF, which is very drastic. My thought is I have sympathy for him because he has a lot of payments due. I also have sympathy for the Germans and the rest of Europe, because when you look at, they have negotiated at the end of February that Greece would undertake reforms, and Greece has just come with broad brush ideas. There's no specificity so far in the reforms they have.
As far as we know.
As far as we know. And so unless they give the Europeans some specificity, this is going to clash. What I found interesting, I just came back from Germany and Switzerland. What I find very interesting is that in Germany, obviously they're very concerned about the Greek situation, but they really have this obsession with the finance minister, Mr. Varoufakis, who is sort of traded a little bit like a rock star there.
We mentioned that the relationship between Greece and Germany has soured in recent weeks. You said you just came back from Germany. How did the Germans feel about their role in Europe now as, again, the powerhouse, but again being forced to answer questions when problems like Greece rear their ugly head?
Well, I think, yes, I think they feel that they have to be the strong people, and they feel that it's not just about Greece, it's also about Spain, it's about Portugal, it's all about all these other peripheral countries who may get into trouble. So they feel if we let too much through here, what is coming down the road?
Now, we've got a couple of stories about genetically modified foods. Wall Street Journal looks at China seeking to develop what it calls seed power. Just explain what's going on here, Cornelia.
Well, there's a Chinese company called Hunan Jianding, which trying to buy Origin Agritech, which is a genetically modified developer of food, producer, and China basically wants, to be on equal standing with the Monsantos, the DuPonts and the Syngentas of this world, which I can understand. This whole genetically modified food debate is very much a first world debate. We have too much food. When we look at what we throw away every day, what people throw away every day, we have too much food in the first world, so we can have these idle debates.
You're referring to the story in the Independent as well.
But also to the Chinese story. If you need to feed 1.5 billion people like the Chinese do, or 1.2 billion people as the Indians do, you just need to develop the capability. Yeah.
And just to mention, the Independent story is that there's now an investigation into how some African farmers have been warned of a cancer threat that apparently doesn't exist by humanitarian aid charities. So, as you say, Cornelia, it's a subject that's often debated. We must look at these marvellous pictures on many of the front pages of the newspapers, and the marvellous pictures of Leicester, your hometown, Sally.
Indeed, the centre of Leicester becoming a bit of a centre of attention at the moment, and it's controversial that it's Leicester and not York. But tell us a bit more about your thoughts on this one.
It's very interesting. A hearse, my kingdom for a hearse. There we go with Shakespeare. My thoughts are, whatever he only had a 3-year reign, and Shakespeare probably did not much good for him in terms of the public image of Richard III. But whatever you think about him, his death marked the end of the Middle Ages. It marked the end of the War of the Roses in this country. So for this country, it was a rite of passage. So in that sense, very important. What I find very interesting is, Leicester is a reasonably Tudor, city, and he was from the York dynasty. So there is this, so that Leicester is bearing a York is quite amazing.
Yeah, they're amazing scenes. They certainly were. Cornelia, lovely having you with us. Thank you so much. Sally and I will see you very soon.
Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.